Shabbat Shalom. To be clear, unequivocal, and on the record, I believe Zohran Mamdani poses a danger to the security of the New York Jewish community. Mamdani's refusal to condemn insightful slogans like globalize the Intifada, his denial of Israel's legitimacy as a Jewish state, his call to arrest Israel's prime minister should he enter New York, and his thrice repeated accusation of genocide in Thursday's debate, for these and so many other statements, past, present, and unrepentant, he is a danger to the Jewish body politic of New York City. For those of you who have heard what I said on the high holidays, my words should come as no surprise. For those of you who have heard what I have said over the last 18 years, my words should really come as no surprise whatsoever. Zionism, Israel, Jewish self-determination. These are not political preferences or partisan talking points. They are constituent building blocks and inseparable strands of my Jewish identity. To accept me as a Jew, but to ask me to check my concern for the people and state of Israel at the door is a nonsensical proposition and an offensive one, no different than asking me to reject God, Torah, mitzvot, or any other pillar of my faith. One need look no further than the events of this past week, or for that matter, these past 2 years, to understand the shape and substance of the Jewish soul, how bound up we have all been in the plight of the hostages and our jubilation at their release, in our highs and our lows, in our tortured angst and in our fragile hopes, in our prayers and in our protests, we feel our connection to Israel and its people. It is the invisible string that has tugged at our hearts since the very beginnings of our people. Mamdani's distinction between accepting Jews and denying a Jewish state is not merely a rhetorical sleight of hand or political naivete, though it is, to be clear, both of those. His doing so is to traffic in the most dangerous of tropes, an anti-Zionist rhetoric that, as we have seen time and again in Washington, in Colorado, in ways small and large, online and in person, has given rise to deadly anti-Semitic violence. This past summer, you may recall, at the Glastonbury Music Festival in England, the crowd erupting into chants of death to the IDF. What exactly would a Mamdani administration do should that happen next summer in a concert on Governor's Island or in Central Park? I am not one to play the politics of fear. The entire thesis of my career is to play offense, not defense. But today, as I have done so before, I'm throwing a flag on the field and calling out a threat to the Jewish people 5 minutes early rather than risk being 5 minutes too late. For me, the breaking point came not with Mamdani's earlier statements, his accusations of Israeli genocide, his refusal to name Hamas as a terrorist organization, or for that matter, the flimsiness of his experience, policies, and associations. For me, the damning moment came in a statement he made to a Brooklyn synagogue last week when he sought to assure that community, as reported in the press, that his views on Israel would not amount to a litmus test for service in his administration. I'm not a Zionist, he said. I'm also not looking to create a city hall or a city in my image. I'm going to have people in my administration who are Zionists, whether liberal Zionists or wherever they may be on that spectrum. And while one could commend Mamdani for focusing on professional qualifications rather than political inclinations, for me, the comment was a tell in the most unsettling way. It was, and bear with me for a second, reminiscent of a scene from the classic cult comedy, Ted 2. John, played by Mark Wahlberg, and his talking bear Ted are talking up their dream of opening an Italian restaurant. Eggplant parm on Tuesdays, half-price chopped salad, a place that's open and welcoming to everyone. In Ted's words, a non-restricted place. Anyone can come. Even Jews are welcome. John looks at Ted puzzled. Well, yeah, why wouldn't they be? Why even bring that up? To which Ted earnestly replies, you don't bring it up, you just let him in. So why mention it, John asks, to which Ted responds, no one will. Around and around they go, comic brilliance of a Who's on First variety, but in this case, a parody of the casual bigotry that hides behind the veneer of friendliness, a scene that exposes the absurdity of believing that Jewish inclusion is something to be granted or announced rather than assumed as a given. But what is comic genius in a movie is nefarious and dangerous in real life. When Mamdani says that Zionists are welcome in his administration, he may think he's offering reassurance, but he is in fact revealing something much darker, the assumption that Jewish self-determination is an ideology to be tolerated rather than a birthright to be respected. The very need to say it, betraying a bias so deeply held by himself and his circle that it should make every one of us shudder. Clear, unequivocal, and on the record, Mamdani poses a danger to the security of the New York Jewish community, and if you play out the chess game of democratic politics, a danger that could have much wider consequences. October 25th is a deadline to register. October 25th is a deadline for absentee voting, and the day early voting begins. Election Day is November 4th. Mobilize your networks. Every vote matters. A vote for Mamdani is a vote counter to Jewish interests. A vote for Sliwa, whatever his merits, is a vote for Mamdani. There is a path to victory, but it means that every eligible voter must vote. Nobody sits this one out. I'm glad to have said what I've said. It feels good to get it off my chest, and I imagine for most of you, it feels good to hear me say it. There are others I know who disagree. First, those who believe that there is a danger to essentializing the Jewish people to one issue, Israel. We'll get to those people in a bit. And then there are those who agree with my concerns, but believe it to be unwise to give voice to them given the likelihood of a Mamdani election. Better, they say, to hold my tongue in anticipation of the need to work with him. I hear the concern, and I respect those sharing it. I understand the pragmatic instinct. I choose principle instead. Sometimes one needs to take a stand and be on the record, and this is one of those times. And yet, as good as it feels to speak my mind, and important as it is to do so, the truth is that doing so neither moves the electoral needle sufficiently nor addresses my deeper concern in this mayoral race. How so? First, I am preaching mostly, if not entirely, to the converted. I had you at hello. For me to name the dangers of an anti-Zionist mayoral candidate in this community is a declaration so self-evident that not only does it risk being cliché, but it could serve to feed the very intersectional politics that have fueled Mamdani's campaign in the first place. Hopefully, my words today will prompt you and your network of like-minded voters to turn out big in this election. And that's not nothing. In the last election, I'm told that somewhere between 15 and 20% of the eligible electorate turned out. We got to do better. But to all those people, and there are a lot of you who have emailed me, called me, texted me, urging me to go scorched earth on Mdani, to invite Andrew Cuomo to address our community, fail to understand that it's not the Park Avenue Synagogue community that needs convincing, but the Korean, African American, and Latino communities of New York City. We must turn out to vote, but if it's a win that you want, Cuomo needs to speak at more churches and less synagogues, more barbershops and less boardrooms, up his online game and meet New Yorkers where they are. If it's a win that you want, you need to stop directing your angst at your rabbi who already believes what you believe and direct it to the issues, the places, and people where the needle needs to be moved and can be moved. Because my real concern and fear is a painful truth that Mamdani's anti-Zionist rhetoric not only appeals to his base, but seems to come with no downside breakage. What business does an American mayoral candidate have weighing in on foreign policy unless it scores points at the ballot box? I don't doubt that Mamdani's anti-Zionism is heartfelt and sincere, but his instrumentalization of it as an election talking point should frighten you in the sense that it says more about the sensibilities of our fellow New Yorkers than it does about Mamdani himself. The fact that the latest poll suggests that the Jewish community of New York is almost evenly split between Mamdani and Cuomo names the problem to be not one of our fellow New Yorker, but our fellow Jew. Which means that if there is a play to be made here, given the limitations of time, resources, and people, our efforts shouldn't be directed at the folk who don't need to be convinced, us, nor for that matter should we direct our energies at the folk who can't be convinced. There's nothing you're going to say that will change those minds. Our efforts have to be directed to where we have influence and where the needle can be moved. Those in the middle, the undecided, the ambivalent, the proudly Jewish yet unabashedly progressive, the affordability anxious, Netanyahu wary, Brooklyn-dwelling, social media influenced who need to be engaged. In other words, other Jews. Jews who may not be you, but may be your friends, maybe your children, and maybe your grandchildren. It's these Jews, our friends and our family, who need to be persuaded to prioritize their Jewish selves. It's here that I believe that you can help, and maybe I can help you. I'm imagining some sort of informal campaign, reminiscent of what the comedian Sarah Silverman organized in 2015 when she called on young Jews to go to Florida to persuade their boobies and zadies to vote for then-Senator Barack Obama. She called it the Great Schlep. Now, 10 years later, in 2025, we need the Great Schlep in reverse. Not from the Upper West Side to Surfside, but from Park Avenue to Park Slope, making the case, sharing your story, and reminding the ambivalent and undecided that Jewish identity is not a partisan position, but it's a sacred inheritance, always in need of defense, especially so today. Who are these Jews I'm talking about? First, in many cases, they are Jews who have grown up with an Israeli prime minister with whom not only do they not identify, but is the very antithesis of every other liberal Jewish value they hold dear. They don't want anything to do with Netanyahu or the vision of Israel he and his government represents. For them, Mamdani's rejection of Israel may be a difference, but it's one of degree, not of kind. Second, these Jews feel strongly that they are not voting for the mayor of Jerusalem, and therefore local issues preempt everything else, like finding a job and living well in the city in which they were born without having to spend 50% of their monthly paycheck on rent. Third, the Cuomo you see as a common sense, experienced candidate who, like any politician, comes with both personal and professional baggage, they see as an exemplar of the same old, tired politics in desperate need of being rejected. Now, you may disagree with one, two, or all three of these premises, but remember, it's not you who needs to be convinced. People's perceptions are their realities, and you can't tell a person how they should feel. For a young professional who just wants to live a frictionless Jewish existence, who would like nothing more than to return to a pre-October 7th world where being a Jew was a non-event, it's infinitely more appealing to keep one's head down and vote for the candidate who's believed to be the one who will do the greatest good for the greatest number of New Yorkers, no matter how preposterous some of his proposals are. It's just plain easier to do so, even if that means putting issues of Jewish concern second, even if that candidate lacks the credentials to run my fantasy football league, never mind the most complicated city in America. So when you talk to your friend, your colleague, your child, your grandchild, your niece, or your nephew, under no circumstances should you roll your eyes or wag your finger. Do not do so, because such an approach is sure to backfire. And more importantly, do not do so because doing so delegitimizes the altogether legitimate thoughts that they hold. Begin the conversation as all conversations should begin, not telling them how they should feel, but listening to how they do feel. As always, seek to understand and then seek to be understood. Use, as the expression goes, the I voice. And when you do share your views, if it were me, I would begin the conversation by talking about love. How love, be it of another person, of family, or of country, never exists in a vacuum. How it evolves, how it changes, how it challenges, how the meaning of love comes not in the black and white cases of love without question or no love at all, but in the gray areas when love is tested. It's there in those moments when we measure and remeasure, when the conditions of our love are challenged, when we find out who we really are and discover what love is all about. I would share with that person that love is a commodity that is neither endless nor can be distributed equally. To be a Jew, to be anything for that matter, means to prioritize one love over another. The math is not precise. Love cannot actually be measured in bushels and in pecks. Concerned as we are with the well-being of humanity, we simply cannot, nor should be expected to care for every human the same way. To paraphrase the moral philosopher Bernard Williams, a man who sees two people drowning, his wife and a stranger, and pauses to consider which one maximizes the public good, is a man who has had one thought too many. Self-preservation and self-interest are not only legitimate, but essential to sustaining an ethical life. It's why when the rabbinic sage Hillel was asked by a would-be convert to distill all of Jewish teaching into a single sentence, he didn't quote the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Rather, Hillel taught, what is hateful to you, do not do to another. One cannot love another as yourself, argued Hillel and Jews throughout the ages. The best we can do is to love another because he or she is like us, kamocha, created alike in God's image. There are limits to love. There is a place for self-concern. And as Jews, ahavat Israel, love of Israel, does take precedence over other loves. Every human being is created with equal and infinite dignity, yet we prioritize the needs of our families, of our people, and of our nation. This week, we began reading the book of Genesis, the most universal story of all. Not the creation of the first Jew, but the first human being. Universal as a story is, the 11th century commentator Rashi immediately reads it as a justification for the Jewish claim to the land of Israel. In the 11th century, Rashi's comment served as a defense against the Crusaders' argument that Jews have no claim to Israel. In our day, Rashi's comment can be read as a reminder to progressive Jews of the legitimacy of the Jewish claim to the land. You can love Israel without loving all Israelis. You can love Israel without loving its government. In this moment, when the Jewish connection to Israel sits precariously at the intersection of identity politics and rising anti-Semitic violence, it's not only allowable to place the Jewish body politic at the forefront of our concern, it is required of us. Some will argue that disqualifying Mamdani because of his anti-Zionist posture only feeds the anti-Semites' charge of dual loyalty. I hear this objection, and I respect those saying it, and I reject it fully. I reject it first because it surrenders to a Jewish insecurity and fear about what the anti-Semites might think. I don't care what the anti-Semite thinks, and neither should you. And second, I reject it because it betrays a category error with regard to the place Israel has in my Jewish identity. Israel is not a detachable policy preference. It's integral to who I am as a Jew. To delegitimize Israel, as Mamdani has repeatedly done, is for me an attack on my personhood as a Jew, as an American, and as an American Jew. This is not about dual loyalty. This is about my fundamental security and the security of my co-religionists. Unless you think it to be otherwise, I understand. I understand that it's not easy. It's hard to prioritize love of Israel when the government of Israel doesn't reflect your sensibility, that feeling of your love being tested. I understand that it's hard to prioritize one's Jewish self over the array of other labels of identity we all wear. I understand it is hard to reach beyond the sparkle of the shiny new object in favor of the one that is scuffed, worn, and familiar. I wish it were otherwise. I wish we had two candidates with equal interest, or better yet, equal disinterest in the Jewish community. I would love nothing more than our mayoral contest to be focused solely on affordability, food instability, education, policing, sanitation, taxes, the everyday issues that shape our great city's life. A contest where all of you could argue to your heart's delight about which policies best serve the future of our great city, and I could give a sermon on, well, anything else. But this election cycle, it's simply not the case. We can only play the cards we are dealt. And in this case, in this hand, I choose to play the one that safeguards the Jewish people and protects our community and ensures that our seat at the table remains secure. I choose steadiness over spectacle, tested loyalty over a reckless gamble. It is, by a certain telling, a story as old as the Garden of Eden itself. We stand there, staring at that big apple, if you will, wondering what is in our long-term best interest. The options are in front of us. We're wrestling within and with each other, and we know that we have a choice to make. That feeling inside, it's what makes us human. Embracing our agency and determining our future, that too makes us human. It's not easy, so let's choose wisely to engage, to mobilize, to turn conviction into action, self-concern into ballots, and most of all, to vote. Now is the time to make your voice heard. Shabbat Shalom.